The moment everything changed didn't look dramatic from the outside. Chicago was cold in that polished, expensive way it gets downtown at night. All glass and wind and reflections. From the rooftop restaurant, the city looked perfect. Gold lights in the river, traffic moving below like it belonged to someone else's life. Megan had picked the place. She said it would look good in photos. She was across from me, holding her wine glass by the stem, half watching the skyline and half watching her phone light up beside the plate. Candlelight softened her face, made the whole thing feel like the kind of night a man was supposed to remember for the right reasons. I had a ring in my jacket pocket. I checked for it twice on the drive over. The waiter had just left after setting down our entrees. Megan angled her plate toward the candle, leaned in slightly, and took 2 quick pictures before touching the food. Then she looked up at me with that small, controlled smile she used when she wanted to correct me without making a scene. "Behave tonight," she said quietly, almost like she was finishing a private thought. Then she lifted her glass and added, "Or someone else will take your place." She said it calmly. No anger, no raised voice. Just a neat little sentence dropped between the plates. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. The noise of the restaurant kept going around us. Silverware, low conversation, a burst of laughter from somewhere behind me. But none of it reached me the same way after that. Something in the room shifted. The view didn't matter. The candle didn't matter. The ring in my pocket suddenly felt ridiculous, like I was carrying a prop for a scene that had already been cut. I looked at her, waiting for the follow-up. A smile. A joke. Some signal that she understood what she'd just said. But Megan only picked up her fork, glanced at her phone again, and acted like the evening was still intact. That was the first real crack. Not loud, not public, just clean enough that I felt it all the way through me. Until that night, I believed our life together had a direction. Megan and I had been living in the loft on West Kinsey for a little over 3 years. It was one of those converted warehouse spaces, exposed brick, tall windows, polished concrete floors that stayed cool even in the summer. The lease was in my name because my credit made the approval easier when we first applied. At the time, it felt like a technical detail, nothing more. Back then, everything between us seemed simple. Megan had energy, ambition, and a way of filling a room with motion. She started building her social media accounts shortly after we moved in. At first, it was harmless. Pictures of brunch places, rooftop views, weekend trips to Michigan. She said she liked documenting life while it was happening. I didn't think much about it. My days were long and structured. Finance isn't glamorous work most of the time. It's spreadsheets, risk meetings, and long hours under fluorescent lights. I left the apartment before Megan woke up most mornings and came home when the skyline outside our windows had already gone dark. What I saw when I walked in usually looked good. Megan sitting on the couch editing photos. Packages stacked by the door from clothing brands sending things for her to post. She talked about follower counts the same way someone else might talk about sales numbers or quarterly growth. And I supported it. Most of the dinners out, the weekend flights, the new camera equipment, those came from my accounts. I never kept score. In my mind, we were investing in a shared future. She was building something public. I was building something stable behind it. That was how I explained the small things I didn't quite understand. The phone in her hand almost constantly. The way she'd stop mid-conversation if a notification popped up. The careful staging of ordinary moments so they looked effortless online. Sometimes I would say something and realize a few seconds later she hadn't heard a word of it. But those moments were easy to dismiss. People get busy. People focus on their projects. That's what I told myself. Looking back, the signs weren't dramatic enough to trigger a confrontation. They were quiet shifts in attention. Conversations that felt slightly shorter than they used to be. Nights when she stayed up late responding to messages while I went to bed alone. None of it looked like a crisis. It looked like life moving forward. So when we walked into that rooftop restaurant that evening, I still believed the trajectory of our relationship was steady. I still believed the ring in my jacket pocket had a place in the story. It took one sentence for that assumption to start unraveling. After Megan said it, the dinner kept moving forward, but something inside me stopped participating. She didn't repeat the comment or explain it. She simply continued the evening as if nothing unusual had been said. That was the strange part. If the words had come out in anger, maybe I would have responded the same way. But they arrived calmly, almost professionally, like a reminder about a rule I was supposed to understand. Megan adjusted her plate again, turning it slightly toward the candle so the light hit the food the right way. She leaned over, took another picture, and checked the result with the careful attention of someone reviewing a contract. "Hold on," she said quietly, more to the phone than to me. Her thumbs moved quickly across the screen. The waiter came by to ask if everything looked all right. Megan smiled immediately, perfect timing, practiced, and said the place was beautiful. As soon as he stepped away, she lowered her voice and recorded a short video of the skyline behind her glass. "Chicago nights," she said softly toward the camera. Then she posted it. Across the table, I sat with my hands resting near the edge of the plate. I hadn't touched the food yet. The steam rising from it had already started to thin. Normally, I would have tried to keep the conversation going. Asked about the restaurant, the view, her plans for the next week. That was how our dinners usually worked. Megan talked about content ideas, follower engagement, brand offers. I listened and nodded in the right places. But now I was noticing things I hadn't focused on before. How often her eyes returned to the phone even while she was speaking. How her attention seemed divided into small, rapid pieces. One for the table, one for the skyline. Most of it for the messages appearing on the screen. At one point she laughed quietly at something she read. "People are already asking where this place is," she said. She still hadn't asked me anything. The sentence from earlier, "Someone else will take your place," kept circling in the back of my mind, not as an insult, but as a statement. The more I replayed it, the more other memories began attaching themselves to it. Times she canceled plans because of last-minute opportunities. Messages arriving late at night that she answered immediately. Conversations that seemed to stop the moment her phone lit up. None of those moments had meant much on their own. But sitting there, watching her photograph the evening while barely participating in it, they began lining up into something clearer. For the first time, I considered a quiet possibility I had avoided before. The relationship might not mean the same thing to her that it meant to me. I didn't argue with her that night. A few years earlier, I probably would have. I would have asked what she meant, pushed for clarification, tried to steer the evening back into something normal. But the strange calm in her voice had done something to me. It removed the illusion that the moment was accidental. So I stayed quiet. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. We finished dinner the way strangers sometimes do when they share a table out of obligation. Megan talked intermittently, mostly about engagement numbers on a recent post and a brand that had contacted her about a partnership. I nodded where it seemed appropriate. The ring stayed in my jacket pocket the entire time. At one point she asked if I liked the restaurant. "It's nice," I said. That was the longest sentence I spoke during the meal. When the check came, I picked it up before she even glanced at it. The waiter thanked us, and Megan filmed a quick clip of the skyline as we stood to leave. She posted it while we waited for the elevator. Outside, the wind coming off the river cut through the streets the way it always does at night in Chicago. Megan wrapped her coat tighter and walked a step ahead of me toward the parking garage, still looking down at her phone. "People really like this place," she said. "I should come back here with the girls." I unlocked the SUV and she slid into the passenger seat without looking up. The drive home was quiet. Traffic moved slowly along the river, headlights stretching in long reflections across the water. Megan answered messages most of the way back, occasionally smiling at something on the screen. Neither of us mentioned the comment she'd made. When we reached the loft, she went upstairs first, still typing on her phone as she walked. I heard the bedroom door close a moment later. I stayed downstairs in the living room. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city outside the windows. From the couch, I could see the skyline through the glass, buildings lit in neat rows, steady and indifferent. I sat there for a long time without moving. The ring was still in my pocket. I took it out and turned the box in my hands once before setting it on the coffee table. Something had shifted inside me during that dinner. It wasn't anger, not even disappointment. It was more like a quiet recalibration. The proposal I had planned for later that month suddenly felt impossible. Not dramatic, not tragic, just incompatible with what I had heard across that table. For the first time since we moved into the loft, I stopped trying to repair the moment. Instead, I accepted it. I stayed in the living room long after the apartment went quiet upstairs. The skyline outside the windows had thinned into scattered lights, the kind that remain after most of the city has already gone to sleep. Somewhere below, a train passed along the tracks near the river, the sound low and steady. The ring box sat on the coffee table in front of me. I didn't open it again. Instead, I started noticing things I had never taken the time to look at carefully before. Not emotional things. Practical ones. The lease for the loft was in my name. When Megan and I first moved in, the management company had required stronger financial documentation than she could provide at the time. I signed everything without thinking much about it. 3 years later, the arrangement had never changed. The SUV in the parking garage belonged to my firm. It was part of a compensation package tied to my position. Megan drove it more often than I did during the day, but technically it wasn't ours. It was assigned to me. My phone sat on the coffee table beside the ring box. I unlocked it and opened the banking app out of habit. The numbers were familiar. Mortgage payments on an investment property, utilities, insurance, recurring subscriptions. Then I started scrolling through the charges. Megan's credit cards were connected to the same accounts I used for most household expenses. The phone plan ran through my provider. Streaming services, delivery apps, ride shares. Almost every subscription attached to our address traced back to my login information. Again, none of that had ever felt unusual. Couple share things. That was the assumption I had always operated under. But sitting there in the quiet apartment, the pattern began arranging itself differently in my mind. It wasn't a feeling. It was simply a list of facts. The loft, the vehicle, the financial accounts. All of them had one common thread. My name. Upstairs, I could hear faint movement from the bedroom. Megan pacing while talking softly on the phone, the way she often did when answering messages late at night. Her voice carried through the floorboards in short bursts of conversation, followed by laughter. I didn't react to it. Instead, I opened a notes file and began writing down the details that were already clear. Leaseholder, Luke Carter. Vehicle registration, company assignment. Primary credit accounts, mine. One by one, the structure of our shared life appeared on the screen in simple lines of text. For years, I had treated those details like background noise. Now they looked more like a blueprint. Morning came slowly through the tall windows of the loft, the light sliding across the concrete floor in pale gray lines. I had slept for maybe 2 hours on the couch, though sleep wasn't really the right word for it. My mind had stayed too active for that. But the clarity I felt was steady. Upstairs, the bedroom door opened sometime after 7. Megan walked down the stairs in loose sweats, already holding her phone in front of her face. She barely looked around the living room. "Morning," she said automatically. I nodded once. "Morning." She poured coffee, glanced out the windows for a moment, then started typing again. I watched her move through the apartment the way someone moves through a familiar set, touching objects without really seeing them. None of the things she interacted with were technically hers. That thought wasn't angry. It was simply factual. By the time she left the loft around 8:30, saying something about meeting a friend downtown, I was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen counter with my laptop open. The ring box was gone from the coffee table. I had placed it back in its small black bag earlier that morning. Around 9, during a break between calls, I walked 3 blocks to the jeweler where I bought it. The store manager remembered the purchase immediately. He didn't ask many questions when I explained I needed to return it. The transaction took 10 minutes. After that, the day moved forward in quiet, administrative steps. First, the bank. I called and separated the secondary cards that had been issued under my accounts. Nothing dramatic, just a request to deactivate them and send replacements tied only to my name. Then the phone provider. The representative explained the process for transferring numbers to independent plans. Since the account holder was me, the changes were straightforward. Later, I contacted the building management office. The loft access system was digital. They confirmed that guest credentials could be removed instantly if needed. I told them I would update the resident list by the end of the week. Each conversation was calm, professional, almost routine. No one asked for personal explanations. They only needed confirmation of identity and authorization to make adjustments. By early afternoon, the structure of our shared life had quietly shifted. Not emotionally. Logistically, the details Megan had never paid attention to were now rearranging themselves into something new. I was still at my desk when Megan called. The number appeared on my phone around 4 in the afternoon. I let it ring once before answering. Her voice came through immediately, sharper than usual, the calm tone from the restaurant gone. "Luke, what's going on?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out the office window toward the river. The afternoon light was fading behind the buildings. "What do you mean?" I asked. "My cards aren't working," she said quickly. "I tried 2 different ones. They're all declined." I didn't respond right away. "And the car," she continued, her voice tightening. "The SUV won't unlock. I thought the key fob battery died, but it's not that. Did something happen with the account?" A few seconds of silence passed between us. "Megan," I said finally, "where are you right now?" "In the parking garage," she said. "Where do you think?" "I just got back and nothing works." I pictured the concrete structure beneath the building, the rows of parked cars, the echo of footsteps between the pillars. She was probably standing beside the SUV, phone pressed to her ear, trying the handle again even while she talked. "This isn't funny," she added. "It's not supposed to be," I said. Another pause. "What did you do?" she asked. I kept my voice even. "I made some changes to my accounts today." "Your accounts?" she repeated, disbelief creeping in. "Luke, my cards are connected to those." "I know. And the car?" "The car belongs to my company," I said. "They reassigned the access." For a moment, she didn't speak at all. Then her tone shifted from confusion to anger. "You can't just shut everything off without telling me." I turned my chair slightly and rested my elbow on the desk. "I didn't shut everything off," I said. "I separated what was mine." "That's the same thing," she snapped. "How am I supposed to get home?" "You're already home," I said quietly. "You're in the garage." Her breathing came through the phone, quick and uneven. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. I thought about the restaurant for a second, the candlelight, the skyline, the calm way she had delivered that sentence across the table. "You said something last night," I told her. "What are you talking about?" "At dinner," I said. "You told me to behave, or someone else would take my place." She didn't answer. "I've been thinking about that," I continued, "and it made me realize something." "What?" she asked, her voice suddenly smaller. "That if my place is replaceable," I said calmly, "then everything attached to it probably is too." The line went silent again. This time neither of us rushed to fill it. After that call, I didn't hear from Megan for the rest of the evening. Not immediately, at least. I finished the workday the same way I usually did, closing files, answering the last few emails, shutting down my computer. The office around me slowly emptied as people headed home, jackets over their arms, conversations drifting toward the elevators. Outside, Chicago was settling into the early evening rhythm again. Traffic along the river moved in steady lines of light. When I reached the parking garage beneath my building, my phone buzzed. 3 missed calls. 2 text messages. The first message read, "Luke, we need to talk. This is ridiculous." The second arrived a few minutes later. "I'm serious. Call me." I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding and drove home. The loft looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Megan's shoes near the entryway. Packages stacked by the wall waiting to be opened. The apartment still carried the faint scent of her perfume and the candles she liked to burn in the evenings. But the atmosphere had changed. Not dramatically, just enough to feel different. Around 9 that night, another message appeared on my phone. This one was longer. "Megan, I had to take a ride share because the car wouldn't work. My cards are still declined. The front desk says my key doesn't open the building anymore. What is going on?" I read it once, then set the phone down again. Over the next few days, the situation moved forward on its own. Megan stayed with friends at first. I heard that indirectly through a mutual acquaintance who texted me asking if everything was all right. I told him things were fine. Online, Megan's social media accounts continued posting pictures, coffee shops, rooftop views, carefully framed shots that suggested everything was normal. But the rhythm changed. Without the loft, the car, and the steady stream of expenses quietly handled in the background, maintaining that lifestyle required constant improvisation. Invitations replaced routines. Borrowed spaces replaced the one she used to present as home. Meanwhile, my own days became simpler. I reconnected with a few friends I hadn't seen in a while. People I used to meet regularly before my life had narrowed to work and whatever plans Megan had scheduled. We met for drinks one Thursday evening near the office. No one asked many questions. They didn't need to. For the first time in a long while, my life felt quieter. Not empty, just balanced again. A few weeks passed before I heard Megan's voice again. By then, the situation between us had settled into something quieter. Not resolved exactly, but no longer chaotic. The practical changes had already taken effect, and life had adjusted around them. One evening, I was walking along the river after work when my phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hi," she said. Her voice sounded different, less controlled than it used to be. "Hi," I replied. There was a short pause. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said. "Actually talk. Not like the last time." I kept walking along the path, watching the reflections of the city lights break across the water. "What do you want to say?" I asked. Another pause. "I think things got out of hand," she said carefully. "You didn't have to cut everything off like that." I thought about that sentence for a second. "I didn't cut everything off," I said. "I just stopped holding it all up." She didn't respond right away. "I've had to stay with different friends the last couple weeks," she said finally. "You could have at least warned me." The wind coming off the river carried the distant sound of traffic from the bridge above. "Megan," I said, "do you remember what you told me at dinner?" She sighed quietly. "I told you I was joking." "Maybe," I said. "But it wasn't the kind of thing people say by accident." For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question I think she had been circling since the call began. "So that's it," she said. 3 years and you just walk away?" I stopped near the railing and looked out across the water. "It wasn't one moment," I said. That sentence just made things clear. Clear how? That the balance between us wasn't what I thought it was. Another silence followed. "I never said I didn't care about you," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. And I meant it. The truth was, I didn't feel angry anymore. Not even disappointed. What I felt was something much simpler than that. Understanding. Some relationships end with arguments or betrayals that explode into the open. Ours ended with a sentence spoken over dinner and the slow realization of what it meant. Standing there beside the river, I understood something I hadn't before. Walking away wasn't revenge. It was just the natural conclusion of finally seeing things clearly. A few months later, my life looked different in ways that were mostly quiet. I moved out of the loft and into a smaller house just outside the city. Nothing dramatic, just a simple place with a narrow yard and a porch that caught the afternoon sun. The commute was a little longer, but the drive gave me time to think in a way the elevator rides downtown never had. Weekends started filling with things that used to get postponed. Dinner with friends. Long runs along the trails outside the suburbs. Even small things, like cooking at home without a phone buzzing on the counter beside me. The silence in the house didn't feel empty. It felt balanced. Every once in a while I would hear about Megan indirectly. A mutual friend mentioning she had moved apartments again. Someone showing me a post where she was traveling somewhere new. I didn't follow the details. Not out of resentment. Just distance. Looking back, the moment at the restaurant no longer felt dramatic. It was simply the point where something unspoken became clear. For a long time, I thought the worst thing someone could be in a relationship was replaceable. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was believing it. Once that belief disappeared, everything else rearranged itself naturally. Life didn't collapse after that dinner in Chicago. It just corrected its course. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.